Victoria Denholm is the president of the Sydney Flames basketball team and is the CEO and director of Wollemi Capital Group Syndicate, the new majority owners of the whole WNBL league. Thanks for joining me today, Vic.
Thanks for having me, Abby.
I wanted to start by asking a bit about like your childhood when you were in Australia, in Sydney, and you mentioned the first kind of 8 years of your life you lived here. But I also read that you went to some like Kings games, so you were kind of into basketball a bit. But like, what place did sport kind of hold in your childhood then?
Yeah, it's interesting. My memories of living in Sydney, probably the biggest sporting event I remember is the Olympics. And I remember like being so excited and we saw like the swimming was like really big for me because we were really into swimming then. And basketball kind of existed. My brother was really into it. And, I know my mom talks about having gone to games and I know we went to games, but I think at that point in time, it wasn't really cemented. I think basketball for me really cemented when we moved to the U.S. because, again, in a world where you're not really there's no swimming really. Yeah. It was like the one sport I was like, oh, I know this sport. And we became season ticket holders of the Denver Nuggets when we moved to the U.S. and they were horrible. But we got to see Allen Iverson come to town and Kobe and Shaq. And so even Michael Jordan. Wow. And so that to me really was where basketball was seated. But I know I engaged with it in Australia. I just don't really have as strong memories of that.
Yeah, but I guess like you said, it was kind of when you moved to the US. But I guess that's a pretty big move. We forget how how did you adjust? Did basketball almost kind of help you settle in a bit, knowing this is a familiar sport? I know what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was the first school sport I played when we got there. Okay. So it was basketball season kind of within a month or so after moving there. So it was I was making friends through playing sports and connecting. And then also it was something our family kind of bonded around. Like I said, we would go to games. So yeah, it definitely took that kind of place as number one. And even on the playground, right? There was a basketball court and we'd go and play basketball. Cause I do remember, and this is such a tangent, but we used to play handball in Australia, on the playground with a tennis ball. And then when I moved to the US, they played this game called Foursquare, which was kind of similar but kind of different. And I just I couldn't get my head around it. I was what is this game? So basketball was the safe space.
Okay, that makes sense. But I guess you said before, you mentioned what you wanted to be when you grew up, and it kind of changed a lot. But was basketball just kind of something you were doing for fun then? Did you want to keep playing? I don't know what your relationship with the WNBA was as well, but
yeah, it's a great question. I don't think I ever really was good enough on the court to be oh, I'm going to be a professional basketball player. I always play for fun and I loved the environment, but I was always kind of the teammate or the player that tried to make everyone around her better, but was never a star. So I think I was realistic enough to know professional sports was not my future. My relationship with the WNBA, and again, my brother was so formative in my childhood around sports, but when we were in the U.S., there were no Australian males playing in the NBA at that point in time. But Lauren Jackson was tearing it up in the WNBA. And so my brother was this huge WNBA fan and a huge Seattle Storm fan, which again, as a younger sister, watching your older brother idolize a female athlete, you're this is cool. Yeah. And so for me, that was really my first kind of introduction into the WNBA. And Lauren's career was incredible. But then obviously, seeing more Australians come in and getting to experience that. Unfortunately, we never lived in a WNBA city, so I didn't have season tickets. But the few times we went to games was just incredible.
Wow, I'm just still getting over that. That's amazing that he was kind of idolizing a female player at the time, because I guess we don't think of that being really common back then as well. But
no, absolutely, and it's what gives me so much hope now, at Flames games and professional women's sporting events here is there are young boys who are just as excited and have female role models. And it's changing the narrative.
Yeah, well, I did want to kind of ask you a bit more about kind of your teenage years over there, because I've just heard so many, and I guess all of the movies you watch of American schools over there, it just looks amazing. But what were your teenage years just in the US?
Yeah, it's funny. I because I was there for most of my schooling, I don't really know anything different.
Yeah, that's true.
I moved there when I was 8, so I kind of remember school here. But I mean, it was a lot of fun. I think there was a really big emphasis on doing things outside of just going to school and going to class, playing a sport or doing music or drama. Everyone kind of had their thing. I think the movies kind of get that right in that there are a lot of people whose friend groups and identities are around their extracurriculars, not necessarily their in-class friends. And so for me, I always played sports, and that was very foundational. But like I also went to like a pretty small private school, so we didn't have like all of the kind of like things that you see in movies.
Yeah, okay. But I guess like as you did start to get like a bit older, like you've said, it's kind of like your whole like personality and like identity is kind of based around like your extracurriculars and stuff. But like what were you starting to like study like as you got older and yeah, it was...
Yeah, again, I think in high school, I definitely lent more into like science and math. I think it's slightly different though, because like in the US, the college system is where you kind of like specialize.
Yeah.
So I applied to a school and like much to my mom's like confusion, like I applied to a school, started studying medicine, and then but I was like undeclared. And so like
Okay.
by the end of my first year, I had taken like classes in architecture, like in art, in religion, in medicine, and I was kind of like, oh, like it's fun just like on this learning journey. And my mom was like, what are you like, what is your degree in? I was like, I don't know yet. And like, I feel like that is such a different mentality than Australian university systems.
Yeah, okay.
And I really benefited from that because I went to a liberal arts school. So you like get a very well-rounded education, and I left with a degree in international relations and economics, but like I had all of these courses that had absolutely nothing to do with that as well.
Wow, okay. So it kind of took a little while for you to kind of like find out what you wanted to do. But like you mentioned, like sport was kind of like a massive part of your childhood. Like you were always playing sports and involved with that. But like also kind of being like a change maker and having a passion for leading. Like, did you have that at all? Did you know you wanted to kind of go down like, that path?
I mean, yes and no. Like I always lent into like doing the things I enjoyed doing. Sports was obviously a piece of that, but like I probably didn't have like a crafted role in sports, right? Like I think there are some people who are so driven and they're like, this is what I'm gonna do,
Yeah.
and this is how I'm gonna get there. I was never really like that, and I'm still not really like that, to be honest. And so for me, it's like taken so many twists and turns, but it has always been something I've like cared about and spent a lot of my free time doing, and engaging with. I think probably, the like closest I had gotten in the kind of my career journey up to this was like the intersections of sports and technology, and like the sports tech space, because I've done quite a bit in the tech space and working with founders and startups in the sports tech space. Obviously there's a big intersection, but yeah, I guess like I meet so many incredible trailblazers and women like in the sporting world, and I'm like, you are so driven and so like we're on this path for a long time, and I feel like I've just gotten on the train, and I'm like very excited to be on the train and like make some changes and like lean in where I can. But like I feel like my value add is definitely in the like business landscape and the excitement and the like capital side of things, and like let the basketball like experts kind of play the basketball expert role.
Well, yeah, but it definitely does feel like you're kind of coming into that field now and being a leader, which is great to see. And I wanted to kind of start by asking, yeah, like where that all kind of started from. And your mum, Robin, who is the chair of Tesla, for anyone that doesn't know, seems like she was a pretty good role model for you. And I mean, as well, like maybe using her platform to make change happen. But like, have you learned a lot from her over the years? And I guess what have you learned about kind of that?
Yeah, I mean, my mom's story is incredible, and it like never fails to amaze me, even though I've like been on the ride for my whole life. It's just like how much she achieves and like how she does it. And the thing that like, there's probably two things. One is like her instilled belief in me from a very young age. Like she is one of the most supportive people, and like I said, like I have not taken a straightforward path, and she has never question that. I think like sometimes parents can come across as like, oh, you need to do it this way and you need to go this way, and she's not like that. She's been so supportive, and trusting that we're on this path and we'll figure it out, but she's also just like, I mean, she's incredibly smart and incredibly hardworking. I think that was probably the other thing she distilled in me is like, I remember, weekends in my childhood where we would like spend it at her office because she like was working and had to get stuff done. And again, as a kid, you kind of make the most of it. And she worked in tech, so there was always like video games and fun things to do. But that was probably the other thing. That was just like, find what you love and then work really, really hard at it, and good things will happen.
Yeah, and I guess now you're kind of working with her as well. And I wanted to ask about Wollemi Capital Group Syndicate. Like, if you could just kind of explain a bit about what that is and also how it started.
Yeah, so Wollemi Capital Group is our family office, and we formed 3.5, almost 4 years ago. It's an investment vehicle, and so when we formed that, we kind of talked about what are the things we care about and what do we want to invest in and use our capital for. And, sports was a very big thematic. I think me and my brother had this moment where we were like, basketball is like, front and center for us. And, again, my mom was like, be realistic, like, you guys, like, this is our legacy and what we're doing. And we have 3 core pillars. Climate and climate and the environment is a key one for us, obviously for a lot of reasons. The climate's changing, the planet's changing. How do we support that? Diversity is a really big pillar for us, supporting incredible female entrepreneurs like yourself who are doing things that, are not well recognized or supported or funded. Community is the third piece for us. And sports is obviously so foundational to our sense of community, but also to the community more broadly. And so Wollemi Capital Group Syndicate is our family offices and another party that have invested into the WNBL.
Yeah, and so you're the CEO of Wollemi.
I am, yes.
Yeah, and so like you've said, you're kind of invested in a lot of different things, but also became part of the ownership of the Kings and Flames a little while ago now, I think in 2022. But I guess as the CEO, like, did you always want the company to be able to make an impact? Yeah, like in sport and particularly basketball, like you've kind of mentioned, like why is that so important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on it. We became involved with Paul Smith and like his ownership of the Kings and Flames in 22. And it was very much a minority. Let's see what this is like from a business perspective. Like I said, we've been fans for a long time and engaged with basketball that way, but we'd never, done it from a business view. And so learning from Paul Smith and what he had created at Hoops Capital was like very inspirational and exciting for us. And then the real obvious one for us was, right, we had the Kings and we had the Flames, and the inequity between the 2 leagues, right? Like the NBL has been on this rocket ship over the last, 5 years. Yeah. And, we're playing in front of sold out stands at Kudos, and like there's so much energy and momentum, and I love that team. But then you compare it to the Flames and, like it's a little bit disappointing, I think, when it, like we're still on an infancy and a growth journey, but like the support from the leagues were just completely different. And, the capital and resources at a league level, just so different. And so for us, it was like, well, we can do what we can at the Flames, and we've invested so much time and energy and love into this team, and we're growing. And it was so exciting on Saturday to see so many people there and cheering and wearing their jerseys and supporting our incredible players. But for us, it's like, well, we can do what we can do at a league, at a club level, but like the league needs to grow and the league needs to be invested in. And so that was really kind of the driver for us to get involved at a league level.
Yeah, well, I guess I kind of start to get to the end and also just go back to what we've been talking about before, where your business skills have kind of helped you to be able to involve in sport and also to make a difference. But like, what has sport been able to give back to you?
Yeah, I mean, sport is everything. I still, play social basketball once a week. Like the friendships that you make on the court, the outlet, like the mental health relationship I have with sports and staying active. I wouldn't change that. I think, and then the community around Hoops Capital and around the Kings and Flames, like I've met some very incredible people. I mean, even just our playing group, right? Like you look at Kayla, you look at Swaney, you look at Emma Clark, like they all have these incredible stories of resilience. And like for me, it's like, well, they deserve the best. And so like, how do we invest and help them be in the best, league in the world, and that they have all the same access to things that our Kings players have, like, and let's grow together is really how I view it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's so important, but it's also like a really exciting time where we're seeing like so many more women in leadership roles, which I think is also a pretty important part. But like, why do you think it's so important to have that, I guess, as someone who's kind of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cliche, but representation matters. And I'm sure you see it in your world too, right? Like there's not enough women in media covering women's sports or men's sports for that matter. But it's like you have to kind of see it to know that it's possible, or that, like changing people's stereotypes and assumptions. And so for me, like the leadership piece is so important, not just from a representation, but like also like you want the best ideas, right? Like at the end of the day, if you're trying to do something radical, you want to make sure that you're thinking about it in like a radical way, and that you're having people who, have the best ideas. And, those people come from a diverse range of places. Yes, men and women, but also, they come from all over Sydney. They come from all over the country. They come from all over the world. And so like giving people who haven't had a microphone or haven't had the platform to have their input into what they think is really important in terms of like getting to a successful outcome. And so I think having women in leadership roles is like a reflection of that. And I'm really excited to see more incredible women around the league and around other leagues and around the sport, because I think it'll just keep growing from there.
Well, I do hope that there's like a lot of young girls hopefully listening to this and being inspired, knowing that they don't just have to be like an athlete to be involved in sport, but there are so many other ways as well. Like if they're really like good at being financial or creative in other ways. But like, do you have any advice for those people that know they want to be involved in sport, but maybe in a different way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest one is resilience, and you will probably have to pave your own way in some ways, but like there are some incredible people and resources to help you. I think to your point, like you don't have to be an athlete to be in professional sports. And even if you look at the incredible Hoops Capital team and our CEO, Chris Pongrass, right? Like he always jokes that he was a terrible player, but he's created some of the best rosters in basketball, right? Like, so you can still be very involved in like the on-court stuff as well without actually being good or feeling like you're good enough to be an athlete. But I think the biggest thing, and you would see this, I'm sure, all the time with young adults, is you have so many options ahead of yourself, and your future is unknown, right? Like, yes, you can drive down a certain path, but I think for me, it's like, get as many skills as you can and lean into the things that you like, but like, don't feel like just because your friends are doing something, or you feel like you have to only do this one thing, that you can't do something else. You absolutely can, and you absolutely should while you're a kid, because you have more time now than you have later in life.
Yeah, well, that kind of brings me to my last point that I wanted to ask you about, which is just with everything I guess we've talked about, like why has it been so important for sport to be a part of your life?
Yeah, I mean, the relationships and friendships I've had in sport, and it's just fun. Like, I think, in a world where things seem hard and there's so much, happening in the world, and, you only need to open Twitter or Instagram to see bad news sometimes. It's like sport's such an escape from that. Like, it's not in isolation, but like the resilience and hard work and grit and what happens on the court or on the field, like, it's just like a reflection of the best of people, I think. And like, I love that.
Yeah, well, that was such a great chat, Victoria. I feel like you've shared a lot of advice and wisdom, so it was so nice to chat to you.
Thank you so much, Abby. And I love what you're doing. I'm a big fan and can't wait to see you grow.